the Rangers. Deeply, we care about you and we appreciate that you've joined us for the ride. This is episode 43, live on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. The full video will be up on our YouTube page at Liberty Blue Podcast, and the audio version will be up wherever you get your podcasts. Pre-recording just a little bit earlier than our 6 p.m. usual start tonight, but hopefully nothing crazy happens before to make this episode moot. That would be kind of sad. Hopefully it doesn't happen. Search Liberty Blue on your favorite podcast platform and it should be there. Give the show that shiny and illustrious 5-star review on Apple Music and Spotify. Apple Podcasts and Spotify helps the show way more than you think it does. Today's show is about the last 4 games, what matters in these final 5 games, the confidence meter, and a whole lot more. Nick, for the Rangers right now, the number one priority, I think, is just get there.
Yeah, at this point, that's kind of been the vibe since December. I mean, before the season started, when we had Sam on the show, that's exactly what he said. Everybody's walking around like, all right, can we get to the playoffs already? And, that was September. That's generally been the vibe. Everybody going off of we got there last year. We're pretty much the same team. We know we're going to add guys at the deadline. We know our expectation is to go for it. And that's kind of been the lingering, creeping overhead of this entire season. And it's why it's been so disjointed. Hockey Statminer had a really interesting thread about this. I want to say it was Saturday afternoon on the off day, where just how the Ranger season has gone broken up into different segments, where they haven't really ever gotten the ball rolling to a great matchup of process and results. When they've played well, they haven't been rewarded. When they haven't played well, they've been able to steal it with their high-end talent. And they've never gotten those two things lined up really at any point this season. The best stretch they had was from mid-January till about late February. And then they had all the roster stuff with Kane. Miller missed a couple games. Lindgren's been out a while. Still trying to really figure out the optimal deployment for the top 6, because that keeps changing every few games whenever they can't get going. Gallant's been inclined to tinker with that. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, the next 5 games, next week and a half, 2 weeks is about no one getting hurt, trying to figure out the power play deployment, trying to figure out if you're going to play Kane with Zibanejad or with Trocheck, or you're going to do it with Panarin, with Kreider, whatever. That's really all we're doing here. We're picking nits. The Rangers are more or less locked into that spot. The different sites, the most common opponent is the Devils. Obviously, we've all established this. We've now, after Thursday, if they had won on Thursday, okay, maybe there's a chance they slide up. They could get home ice against the Devils, but more or less, they're 91% chance to be the 3 seed. So this is what it is. There's not really a whole lot of opportunities to move up at this point, and the teams below them, there's no chance of them catching up.
No, right, for the Rangers right now. In theory, they could LTIR Lindgren and just emergency call up kids just to see, like, hey, can Robertson do something at the NHL level? This is the perfect time because the Rangers aren't going to move down. They aren't going to move up. They have 5 games to just play with. If you want to bubble wrap, guys, go right ahead. If you want to try things out with new pairs or lines or whatever, go right ahead. Right, like I would love to see the Rangers call up Brzezinski or Nick Robertson or just somebody, like, show us what you got. Just, hey, we're gonna wrap up Panarin for 5 or for 2-3 games, whatever it is, for we'll say as an injury. And if you're listening and not watching the show, I have big old air quotes with quote unquote injury. If Panarin suddenly appears to get one and the Rangers need an emergency call up, well, there you go. I at this point, why not? You, like, for Gerard Gallant, I understand the thought process of not forming bad habits and still trying to win games. I'd rather them win than lose for sure. But right now, the number 1, number 2, number 3 priority for this team has to be just get to the playoffs. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody just get there in one piece. I would like the Rangers to call up Robertson or somebody. Maybe Zach Jones would like another shot at the NHL level, because here's the thing: Ben Harper not good. So if one of the young guys down in Hartford could take his spot, if need be, that would be great.
So you mentioned Ben Harper, and I was going to save the stat for later when we talked about the Devils game, but it's very telling and very funny, just frankly. So the kid line played 4.5 minutes, like 4:27, with the Schneider Harper pairing. It's 3% of the expected goals in that 4.5 minutes with Ben Harper and Schneider behind them. So,
Oh
and
boy.
I've got a few visuals from that game to kind of illustrate the problems with the way the Rangers kind of play against good teams and the way the Rangers high end players in specific. I just finished reading right before you jumped on Arthur Staples' column, who did what are 5 takeaways from the last week of Rangers hockey, and his take. I rarely agree with Staples' takes because generally he's very we'll wait and see, even though we're at 75 games. This is kind of what it is
Right.
at this point. But his point generally was the kid line is the only line with a pulse consistently. The other lines go through long stretches of just being out there and not particularly noticeable and not doing a lot at 5-on-5 to create offense or to help on defense. And yeah, the kid line does get killed on defense at 5-on-5, but at least they move their feet. They're skating out of the defensive zone and trying to create offense. But yeah, I do think the counterpoint to what you just said and why I don't think they're going to do it is they still don't know what they want to do here. If this was like last year where they were kind of cemented into the lines at this point, like by this point they were pretty set on Kopp playing with Panarin and Strome and Vetrano playing with Kreider and Zibanejad. Those guys had a good 12, 13 games after the deadline of just those being the lines. There wasn't any tinkering after that. There was individual games here and there, but those were the lines they kept going back to. We still don't know what the ideal combinations are for Trocheck, Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, and Kane and Tarasenko. So until they can say that, then I'd be where you're at. But I do think the coach is still trying to figure out what his team needs to look like. And that's why I think it matters a little bit more than just, getting there. I do think getting there is obviously the single most important thing. But if you're going in, limping in, expecting to just turn the light switch on, not having played a really competitive game in a few weeks, it's really hard to get going again once you've turned it off. Kane said that the other day during the intermissions. I forget which game he was the intermission guest during, but during the first intermission, he said, we've had a hard time getting off to good starts here, and it's really important we don't just think we can turn the light switch on and off because it doesn't work like that. And it's true. We know this. It is really hard for even really good teams to just, after playing meaningless hockey for a few weeks, to turn it on. I mean, you've seen it now for a couple of weeks from the Lightning and the Leafs in particular. Those two teams have known they're going to play each other since January, basically. And both of those teams, I wouldn't say they're on autopilot, but they're kind of going through the motions at this point.
They
They're going through the
essentially are.
motions.
Yeah, like I'm not here to suggest that these 5 games don't matter at all for the Rangers, because of course you still want to play well, you still want to get more cohesion than you currently do. There's a lot of minutia that the Rangers would rather do well in than not, but at the same time, blocking 9 shots from, like, I don't want to see Panarin blocking 9 shots. I don't like, because I'm scared. Like, genuinely.
All right, I'm googling how many shots Panarin's blocked.
I mean, Panarin, or if Adam Fox blocks a shot, every time he blocks a shot, like, I hold my breath. Like, please don't break a bone. Please don't do anything.
Panarin has blocked 11 shots all season, so I don't think you have to worry about him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying names on top of my head, but it's just like, while keeping all the habits that you've formed to this point, like I've said, the number one priority for the Rangers right now is to just be healthy, because there's 5 games left. The worst case scenario is that somebody important to this team goes down before game 1, and all of a sudden you have a glaring issue that could extend to a long stretch, or maybe the entire run. Like that right now is my biggest concern. Is, okay, well, let's say Adam Fox or whoever, like, blocks a shot and he tweaks something or whatever. Okay, well, how does that impact game 1, game 2, game 3 of the playoffs? Like, as much as I want to see cohesion and I want to see the Rangers continue to build off of their good habits, just please don't break anything. I beg, just be smart, please.
See, the problem with that line of thinking, and you hear people talk about this all the time, it doesn't work like that. You can't play hockey, you can't play football.
No, I understand.
With the trying not to, get hurt. That's actually generally when you're more likely to get hurt, because
Right.
You're not as locked in, you're not as focused, because you're just worried about, okay, I can't do that, I gotta get out of the way.
Well, as a fan, And as somebody that has watched this team for 26 years now, at this point, like, just as somebody that's not on the team, just don't want to see an injury, because these 5 games on paper are essentially meaningless. Obviously, of course, like we talked about, the cohesion and the habit forming and the chemistry forming, that's still all important, and I want to see the Rangers continue to build on that. But on paper, these games are only like winning these points. The points don't really matter at this point. Obviously, everything else does still, but the points themselves, do they really matter if they're essentially locked in the third place? The answer is pretty much no, unless the Rangers win all 5, the Devils lose all 5, or the Hurricanes lose all 5, and now maybe we have some standing shifts. But other than that, this is probably how the standings are going to stop, and you're gonna go to New Jersey for round 1, game 1 in New Jersey. So again, the biggest thing for the Rangers is continue to build off of what you've already built to this point. There's still things that they have to work on, of course. Don't get hurt.
So, one last thing on that before we move on and we start talking about the specific games. The way I've kind of framed this in my head and why I'm kind of harping on this is because they have spent all season doing this effectively. And you, before we started recording, you said you're not going to be able to change the bad habits they've developed over the course of this season. You're just not in a 5-game stretch that largely doesn't matter. That's how human nature works. You know, you don't have to risk it as much. You're not going to be as adventurous. You're not going to be as risky because you know you don't really have anything to play for. That's what makes it kind of an interesting case study to see what they're going to prioritize these next few games, because I do think we're going to see further tinkering. I don't think we're going to see any call-ups barring another injury or something.
Well, here's a question for you, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to break you up
here.
But question for you then: the Rangers have 5 games left. How many games does Shesterkin play?
Probably 3.
You think he gets 3?
I think he'll get 3. I think they have 1 back-to-back in these last 5, so I think that's definitely 1 Halak, and then probably give Halak 2. I think that's reasonable. I mean, Shesterkin's at, I think, 55 starts this year, which is pretty in line with what you want from your starter in today's NHL. You'd like to keep them under 60. 55 with 5 to go. If he gets to 58 starts, that's not bad.
And he's looked really good, too.
Yeah, right? He's been great. The last month and a half, he's the driving force. I mean, I went and looked at it. They're really bad defensively since the trade deadline. They are, I want to say, 22nd in goals, expected goals against. They're like 28th in high danger goals against, but they're 4th in save percentage. That's buoying the team right now, defensively at least, is the goaltending. And the offense has been good enough to outscore the defensive woes. So that's been the thing for the last month. So talking about the game on Thursday against the Devils, I was there. I took notes the entire time like a good little journalist. I was with a Bud Light in one hand and my notes app in the other hand. And the first thing I wrote down, the Devils are fast.
Yeah.
The Devils are extremely fast. And that first 10 minutes, I don't know if you've ever seen the Friday Night Lights movie where there's a scene in the movie where they're in the state championship game and the coach, Billy Bob Thornton, sits down on the bench with one of the guys who just came off the field. And he goes, "What's it looking out there like, Ivory?" "Coach, they fast." "Coach, they fast?" "Yeah, you said that already." Yeah, the Devils are that fast. The neutral zone play that the Rangers live by, that long swing pass to get there and then crossing the neutral zone, that was not there. Forced the Rangers into a lot of turnovers in the neutral zone, which is where they really get into issues because none of their defensemen, aside from K'Andre Miller, are particularly fast skaters, where if they get caught in between where they're flat-footed, nobody other than K'Andre is going to be able to recover and get into a position to make a play on it. And then the Devils get rolling downhill on you, and they're using that speed where even if they're not getting to the net or the chances aren't particularly dangerous, they're starting to wear down on you. And that's kind of what happened there in that first period. I went and rewatched the entire game this morning to kind of just, get a feel for it, make sure I remembered everything that I needed to. And the 2 Devil goals, and to be fair, more or less a coin flip game. Losing 2-1, both teams one goal at one. Excuse me. The Rangers didn't have a 5-on-5 goal. The Devils have one 5-on-5 goal and one power play goal. More or less a coin flip game, and that's something else I want to
Rangers
touch
had
on.
their chances too.
They
Like
did. They did. They had
it
a
could have gone
post.
on either way.
They had their post. Vanacek made a couple really good saves there towards the end, especially. I know Kane just missed. I know Fox had a post with like 2 minutes to go in the game like that. Trocheck had one that he slammed into Vanacek's pads. But that's the thing about getting into coin flip games against really good teams. They can win the coin flip too. The Rangers have always had the equalizer in those games being Shesterkin, and he was outstanding on Thursday. He kept them in that game in that first 10 minutes. And that's generally been the vibe the last few weeks is they come out of the gate slow, they withstand that early onslaught, and it's either 0-0 or 1-0. Igor keeps them in the game until they get their legs going. And that slowly started happening. The second period was better than the first, and the third period was the best period they played in the entire game. The issue is when the Rangers have to make decisions quickly, they're not great at it. You saw that a lot in that game, especially in the neutral zone. The one really bad Capo Caco turnover happens where the Devils get a 2-on-1 going the other way because they're forcing him to make that decision faster. They are playing up in the neutral zone. They are forcing the Rangers to go laterally in the neutral zone and increase the odds of a mistake. If you're going laterally as opposed to forward in the neutral zone, the wingers can pinch down, less room to operate, force turnovers going the other way. And that's how the Devils create so much volume. The Devils have been up there all year in terms of chances for, expected goals for, because they are aggressive in the neutral zone. They play with a ton of speed, and they get to offense so quickly. Sure, coin flip game, you feel a little bit better if that's Lindgren in there aside from Ben Harper. You heard the stat I mentioned in the first segment where Harper with the kid line was effectively useless. I mean, the kid line got obliterated in that game. And yeah, the Devils did make a point in that first little stretch of playing the Hughes line against them, which no one on the kid line really going to be able to do much against Jack Hughes, especially defensively. Like for as good as Capo Caco is, he's not keeping up with Jack Hughes. Okay game, but I'm going to pull this up. Actually, wait, go ahead. I've been talking for 5 minutes. Go ahead. Let me get your thoughts on the Devils game before I pull up the visual I have.
Yeah, the Devils are a really good team, and that's shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that has watched hockey at all this past year. But the Devils are really good, and if the Rangers come out and play those 10 minutes, the first 10 minutes in the playoffs, they're going to get smoked. Like the what I want to see over these next 5 games that the Rangers have until game 1 is how they come out, because over the course of the past few weeks, they have
the 2 Carolina games, Florida, the Devils, the Bruins, all of them.
And I tweeted this out as well. They've looked like they're treating the first period as a warm-up period. Like they're just kind of out there to get their legs under them, to get the coffee, to get the donuts, to get the to get their
slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, right.
Andrew.
They're out there, but they're just kind of they're still taking warm-ups essentially in the first period. And then come period 2 and 3, that's when they actually start playing hockey. Can we stop doing that, please? That'd be great if they'd nice. Stop doing that. That'd be so great. Like the Devils knew that the Rangers have slow first period starts. The Devils don't have that issue, and you saw that in the first period. The Devils essentially skated circles on the Rangers, which is something that we've been saying about the Rangers for a lot of different opponents this year in the first period. Like there have been times and stretches throughout the entire season where the Rangers have just not skated, where the other team, whoever it is, whether it be the Devils or the Hurricanes or the Bruins or any other playoff team, and even some non-playoff teams as well, early on in games and through stretches of the entire game, have skated circles around the Rangers. Now, the Rangers eventually figure out that, hey, we're playing a hockey game, we should probably try. And then they start skating and the game becomes a lot closer. But against the Devils, again, one of the same issues occurs where for the first 10 minutes of the game, the Devils are absolutely dominating. They have the puck on their stick the entire time. The Rangers are trying to keep up. That's tiring them out. The Devils are in full control of the game, and nothing happens for period 2 and 3. Again, there was a coin flip. There's a lot of chances back and forth, a post, a good save, and that ended up being anybody's game. But the first period is where the game was essentially won. And because the Devils controlled the pace for much of that first period and they got the goals that they needed to get, they won the game. The Rangers have to do a better job of coming out of the gate aggressive and skating. They have to stop with these lazy passes throughout, especially in the neutral zone. They have to stop with these lazy passes. The puck has to be fast and crisp, and they have to get into the offensive zone ready to attack. Because a lot of the times, what they do is they try to force these long passes that teams know that they're going to do. They break them up, and the puck goes the other way, and the Rangers keep doing it, and they keep doing it until like the middle of the game, and the Rangers were like, you know what? Those passes kind of don't seem to be working. Let's just try to force our way in the offensive zone a different way. And what do you know? It works. They eventually figured out halfway through the game that they should try something else. But the Rangers have to do a better job of getting out of the gate and being more aggressive, because if they do this against the Devils for 4 through 7 games in the first round, it's not going to end well.
I mean, yeah, my favorite thing, one of my favorite things in sports, or in even politicians do this too. They say the most obvious thing that we all know, but we do not have any authority to fix the problem. Like when Biden tweets something about how we need to turn America around. Well, Joe, I don't know if you know this, but I'm not the president. Gerard Gallant, well, we've gotten off to a lot of bad starts, and it's been a joke here the last couple of weeks. Well, Gerard, I don't know if you know this or not, but if you have to say that to the media to kind of like passive aggressively get the team to like try a little bit more, I think you need to work on your communication skills a little bit. I do think that if you feel the need to call out your team to the media, that means you're not getting through to them by the normal means. Like, generally speaking, coaches don't have to call out their team because they're able to sit them down every now and then and communicate effectively. And everybody knows Gallant's the field trip chaperone. He's not there to get on anybody's bust anyone's balls. He's there to make sure everybody gets on the bus at the start of the field trip and gets on the bus when they're leaving the museum. That's what he's there to do. And you know what that means? That means it's on Trouba, it's on Gaudreau, it's on Kreider, it's on Zibanejad, it's on the leadership group. When you have a hands-off coach, it is on the leadership group to make sure that everybody's ready to go, to be ready for the moment. We've been talking about this all year. Preparation and mindset are reflections of what you're doing when you are not playing. It is a reflection on attitude, psychology, and how you practice. Do the Rangers start practice slow for the first 10 minutes and then ramp it up? That would explain it. Does everybody just kind of like do the thing where they don't want to kill the vibes, but somebody's being kind of weird and they're just all looking around like, does he realize he's doing that? You know, the forced pass through the neutral zone you were talking about, like, does he realize he just did that? Like, that's the kind of energy I'm getting here, where no one wants to be like a dick and kill the vibes, but at the same time, like, hey, we're trying to win the game here. You got to stop being weird. That's kind of the energy I'm getting from this group of, well, nobody wants to step up and like, you know, take a hard stance because we've got the hands-off coach. Everybody loves everybody. That's great and all. But eventually somebody's got to be rude and a dick here if they want to win anything, because these slow starts against good teams aren't going to be, they're not a prudent way to play. If you start out every game from behind, sure, you're going to win a decent amount. The Rangers have the most come from behind wins in the entire league. That is really hard to play that way consistently. And I know on the show last week we talked about how typically when teams get up by a goal, they play a little more defensive oriented. They're not as advantageous to create offense. But to live this way is so complicated. And that's the one of the points I want to hammer home here. But jump in here, Andrew.
Well, I think one of the names here that doesn't have a letter on their jersey that I feel like recently, at least on the ice, has been a lot more animated, a lot more vocal, is Shesterkin.
Yeah.
If you watch the way that he acts after a save or after a goal or after a whistle, a lot of times he's animated. He's talking to somebody. He's talking to himself. He's doing something that that you look at and say, like, you know, Shesterkin's clearly saying something or thinking something or what have you, as opposed to just a normal stance after a whistle or whatever. Like, especially if you watch that the Caps game yesterday, the second goal that they give up late in that game, Shesterkin was very upset with himself, I think, or somebody. Like, he was not happy that goal came, that he gave up that goal, and it was caught on 4K video. Like, Shesterkin was animated, like he was visibly saying something, and Shesterkin, if he hasn't already, which we're not in the locker room, we don't know, but at a certain point, because he's been talking to his defenseman pretty consistently, especially lately, he might be one of the names in the locker room that have to step up and be like, hey, I can only make so many saves in a game. If you don't step up, especially early on, we're gonna lose. We're gonna lose the bleeping game. How about some defense in the first 10 minutes? That'd be great.
So speaking of this, and I want to pull this up because I did find this interesting. So this is from the Devils game on Thursday, and this is only at 5-on-5. This is just the expected goal split, and you could see the Rangers definitely outplayed at 5-on-5. But the main point, and the reason I pulled this up was to illustrate my point about Schneider and Harper with the kid line. That's the bottom left corner. That is no offense and all of the offense against. You look at some of the other things that jump out here. The Devils' first line, second line, they're kind of ambiguous at this point with Bratt, Hughes, and Palat, and then with Hischier, Meyer, and Howell, where it kind of flows around. But you notice that, sure, the Rangers aren't giving up a ton defensively. That's what the horizontal, the x-axis is. They're all generally playing decently responsible defense, and the final score of the game was 2-1. The Devils only scored one goal at 5-on-5, so that tracks. You see the fourth line up there where, yeah, they don't generate anything, but they don't concede anything. The reason I wanted to pull this up and why, and it's something we've talked about a lot this year, is the Rangers' high-end players struggle against other teams' elite players. This is essentially what it comes down to. When you are in the postseason and you are playing other teams. So I pulled up these 4 screenshots because I have tried. In December, I really tried. Benefit of the doubt, you're trying to be nice. Guys new to the team. Nobody wants to be the Debbie Downer. But where is Ben Harpur trying to play defense here?
I don't know. Well, it's funny
Where
too.
is Ben Harpur trying to play defense here?
It's really funny.
Where is Ben Harpur trying to play defense here? It's just at some point we've got to be honest with ourselves here. That's the biggest thing. I don't mind the optimist people. God bless you. You have more courage in.
But he has grit, Nick. Ben Harpur has grit.
He doesn't have anything.
He's a big body who isn't afraid of hitting people, and he has #grit, Nick. He's got the grit.
That's the thing. I generally understand that. I can put the fan hat on and the fan hat off. I can understand that I am able to do that in a way different from other people. I saw a lot of people saying, well, the game against the Devils doesn't matter. You can't say that. Because if you won the game, you damn well know you would have been running your mouth. The problem, and this has been my working theory forever. Ranger fans carry themselves like Yankee fans, and the Rangers do not have the history that the Yankees do. Like, eventually, yeah, the Yankee fan can always come back to 27 championships. The Rangers got 1 championship since America entered World War II. Let's calm down with the elitism, and we're better than you, and we can say this game doesn't matter, and you damn well know everybody would have been, well, I'm not worried about the first round anymore. So that's all I'm saying here. Let's be intellectually honest. Let's be fair. I understand social media doesn't lend itself to nuance and everybody's always right. I fully understand that. I do. Let's just be honest with ourselves here. Ben Harpur is not an NHL defenseman. The Rangers did not discover a diamond in the rough at 27 years old who's floated around in the NHL for the last 5 years. He is big. He occasionally can play low event hockey. That is his only contribution and why he's here.
One of the slowest skaters in the entire league, if not the slowest.
Yeah, and one last thing on this before we move on. I know everybody's just banking on Lindgren being fine when he comes back. It's going to take him a game or two to get up to game speed, to be ready to go for the playoffs. We always talk about what makes playoff hockey so great. It's that energy, it's that crispness, it's that this game means more. It's really hard to go from playing 1 game in the course of a month and a half right into the playoffs. Sure, he might be all right. It's a lot to ask of somebody to go from cold to playing first pair and PK after not playing for a month and a half, because he's played 1 game in a month and a half.
I think, as an aside, it is genuinely funny to me that Ben Harpur wears number 5, because the number 5 in recent Rangers history in terms of blue liners hasn't lended itself to great defensemen. I've never been a fan of Dan Girardi's defense either as a Ranger, and going from that to, Ben Harpur has the same number and equally can't play defense is I think objectively funny, but that's neither here nor there.
pre-injuries, Girardi was a very good defenseman, but that was 2012 pre-injuries. So like they definitely dragged it along there for a while. And so I want to touch on this, and this is something I was gonna do in the last segment, but we'll do it here so we can tie it all with a bow, and then we can go on to our confidence meter. This is what the kid line is with Harper and Schneider offensively. We know this. Ben Harper and Braden Schneider do not contribute a lot offensively. Yes, Braden Schneider shoots the puck a lot. That doesn't necessarily mean he's contributing to offense. This is what they've done in 93 minutes of ice time in the month and a half they've gotten the kid line back together. Extremely, extremely ineffective in the offensive zone. And the reason I have this is to contrast it when they're away from them. So this one, if it'll load, yeah. This is with Trouba, Miller, Fox, or Lindgren, or Fox and Mikkola. 265 minutes over the course of the season at 5-on-5. Extremely dangerous. So the point here is if you give them anything at 5-on-5 from the back end as support in the offensive zone that isn't just, shots from the blue line, the kid line can really do stuff at 5-on-5. And yes, at last change, you don't have last change because you're on the road on Thursday. The Devils are able to play matchup a little bit more on the set face-offs and stuff. But, set face-offs are only 50, 60% of the zone starts. A lot of these are on the fly, where you're just calling numbers out, you're getting lines out there and going, and they're adapting. And yeah, you're trying to look out for if this group's on the ice, we'd like to get that group on the ice, whatever. But they desperately need Lindgren to come back to play well. They need Mikkola and Schneider to not be underwater. Because, generally, you would like the third pair to be able to tread water. They don't need to be over 50%. They don't even need to be 50%. But if they're 45 or below, then you're effectively playing, two defensive pairs because that pair is only going to get 11, 12 minutes, and that's not a sustainable way to win a Stanley Cup. I jokingly said at one point in the month of February, Adam Fox is going to need to play 29 minutes a night if they want to win a Stanley Cup. That's not a joke anymore. That's true.
Yeah, right. Well, if only they LTIR'd Lindgren and got a defenseman that we've been talking about for 6
They couldn't do that, though. They couldn't because they were so down the road with Kane at that point. They weren't ever going to do that. That's the thing.
I
agree with you.
The thing about the situation is that a different GM who planned ahead better could have done that, is what I'm saying. And I'm not saying Chris Drury is a bad GM by any stretch of the imagination, but what I am saying is that Chris Drury, at least for this coming trade deadline, did not do a great job of planning ahead.
Yeah.
And we saw that because of the 11 forwards, 5 defensemen games that they had going on. If Chris Drury knew or at least planned ahead that hey, Patrick Kane is a reasonable expectation for this team to get, he would have been banking cap way earlier. But then he kind of waited until the last possible minute, which accrued to having not everybody play, and that being that whole debacle for about a week and a half. Chris Drury wasn't going to LTIR Lindgren to get a defenseman. That just wasn't in the plans to begin with. Kane wasn't in the plans to begin with. Obviously, if he was, the cap situation would have been way different leading up to the deadline. That Chris Drury did not plan on this being the final team. This is very obvious because of all the juggling that had to be done in order to make this happen. Now, a different GM who potentially could have either at least seen Kane coming or something along these lines would have done that earlier. Therefore, they would have had more cap space now. Therefore, they could have LTIR'd Lindgren until the playoffs and said, hey, I don't know, insert name here, take your pick. They would have gotten somebody to come in instead of play Ben Harper because my man's is oh boy, he is one of the players of all time, that Ben Harper, I gotta say.
See, the counterpoint to that, and it's unfortunate, is, and I do think this is true to some extent, I still don't know if the Rangers know how to evaluate defensemen properly. This has been a recurring theme forever, where they identify guys on other teams who are playing well, they drop them in here, and they look lost or awful. Granted, some of them are in different circumstances, guys dealing with stuff off the ice, injuries. Ben Harper has never been more than a 7th defenseman in the NHL. He's gotten in, I think the most games he ever played in a season before this year was 40-something. That was for Nashville a couple of years ago. He is a guy. He's a warm body. If he is on the ice for a team that is in the playoffs, you are probably not that good of a team. You can't have glaring weaknesses like that. And we've dwelled on this long enough. But the last point on this before we move on and talk a little bit about how we're feeling confidence wise, I would just like a clear understanding that they know how to evaluate defensemen because they gave Ben Harper a 3-year extension. Granted, 800 grand, not the end of the world. He's probably just going to be the 7th defenseman. He might get waived at that cap hit. You can send him to the AHL, no issues. But just there are guys available every year to take flyers on that are good on bad teams, that have okay underlying numbers, that if you put them in a more favorable situation, take care of them a little bit better, manage their workload, you can get better results out of them. Signing up for a guy who's never had good results based on, 3 weeks of being on your team because, the coach likes him or what have you, that again speaks to the we don't really plan around here. We just go by, oh, this works, great, let's do it. Sometimes that's fine, like giving VZ 2 more years. Yeah, whatever, sure. Doing it for Ben Harper tells me maybe they aren't as good as we think they are at evaluating talent.
My addition to that would be, I know Chris Drury is upstairs watching every game. Even if he doesn't believe in analytics, which it would be like that sentence is silly in and of itself. But let's just say for a second that he doesn't look at analytics at all. Let's just say he is exclusively an eye test guy who is only watching the games to evaluate talent. Let's just say for a second that that's true.
That's what I want to know. What do they see? What do they see?
I don't know what they see. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that like, okay, well, if you, even putting analytics aside, watch him play. He's slow and can't defend. Why is he here?
Yeah. Okay. We'll wrap up on this. We've already gone 36 minutes, and this is a weird. We raised my voice more than once, considering these games don't really matter.
We scream about the Rangers so that you can save your voice, man. That's the whole point of the show.
Yeah. Okay. So I broke it up into 3 categories. We said the talent, the intangibles, the coach. Talent-wise, this is a pretty good group. This is one of the 5-6 best groups in the entire league, talent-wise. That's not saying results. That's not saying how they've played. Talent-wise, this is one of the 5 or 6 best groups in the entire league. Probably not as good as Boston. Probably not as good as the Devils, the Leafs, Colorado. They're in that next tier. They're in the tier with Dallas, Carolina, Tampa. They're in that tier of team. They're going to need a few things to go right for them. But talent-wise, I don't think talent is going to be the reason they don't win.
I would agree. I with Tampa Bay, with they did kind of send the key to the city for Tanner Jeannot, but the Rangers luckily did not do that. Thankfully, that would have been an episode and a half for us if we had to talk about Rangers trading away their entire
5 draft picks,
draft picks just to get a guy who plays in the bottom 6. But the Rangers have the talent. I think this is one of the most talented rosters that we've seen in a long time. The Rangers, the 2014 run, I think, at least on paper, and of course they made it to the final, I thought they were a little bit deeper and they just had less concerns throughout the roster. But this team is up there in terms of how good of a roster the Rangers have put out on the ice in the past however many years it's been, since 30 years since the Cup. Like, this is one of the best teams on paper that the Rangers have put out on the ice, which is ridiculous to say considering the letter came out 5 years ago. Yeah. Like that, you got to give the Rangers credit for that. If nothing else, they deserve credit for 5 years ago. They were like, "Hey, we're tearing everything down. Stick with us." And now 5 years later, to having a legitimate argument that this current roster is one of the most talented that we've seen in recent years, at least that are playing in a Rangers jersey. I'm not saying league wide, but specifically for this franchise, that this is a really talented team. Like that you got to give the Rangers props for that. But in terms of the talent itself, my one concern is the defense. The forward lines are solid and they could withstand an injury. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but they could withstand one if necessary. The defense clearly cannot. Obviously, Shesterkin is an elite, future Hall of Fame goaltender that I'm not worried about ever. But the defense is the one glaring issue, because as we've been watching, Lindgren has been playing, Ben Harper's playing, and he's bad. He is real bad, and teams are so well aware of this. Like it's we are saying this because we've watched him play. You think other teams haven't watched Ben Harper play? You think they haven't dedicated study sessions with the team, pointing at Ben Harper and say, if he's on the ice, go attack him? You think teams haven't done that? Oh, they for sure have. They have watched him play, and they've highlighted him as a problem that the Rangers currently have, and that they could essentially skate circles around if they so choose. So teams have a good understanding of what the Rangers bring to the table and how they can exploit the Rangers. That's what the video staff does. They figure out, okay, what are the issues that this team has and how can we exploit them? And for the Rangers, that bottom pair is the biggest red flag for them. And my confidence with the talent only goes so far as to the defense.
So I'm adding two things to that. Number one, that extends to the forwards playing defense as well.
Yeah, of
The
course.
team as a whole needs to play better defense if they
Yeah.
want to go on a sustained run. And the other part of that I want to add. One of the retorts I got a lot early in the season when I was saying they're playing Vesey and Gaudreau too much is, why are you that worried about guys who are only playing 13, 14 minutes a game? Well, in the playoffs, those 13 or 14 minutes matter a whole lot more. And if you're doing something an entire regular season, what do you think you're going to do in the playoffs? What you did that entire regular season. So, yeah, Ben Harper and Braden Schneider only going to play 13, 14 minutes the whole game. Schneider gets on the PK if it's Trouba or Fox who takes the penalty. Okay. That still matters. That 11, 12, 13 minutes in the playoffs, that matters. Sure. Should I have been that mad about that in December? Probably not. But because this matters, because they want to go on a long run, they want to win the Stanley Cup this year, you can't have any weak links. To your point, teams know they get the puck in on that third defensive pair. They can't break out. They're playing with the kid line. They know the kid line struggles at breaking out of the zone if they don't have clean exits, because none of those guys has great raw straight line speed. The best skater of the three is Chytil, and he's more of a finesse as opposed to speed. He's going to bob and weave his way through traffic with his body control and hands as opposed
Lovely
to just
extension, by the way. I don't know if we talk. I don't think we brought that up, but lovely extension for Heedle, which probably means that this is Goudreau's final season in New York. But continue.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at some point. But generally speaking, yeah, it's fine business. I'm content. I'm happy. I'm a little surprised. I thought he was almost certainly a goner, but
Yeah.
this summer is going to get a lot more interesting, and they're going to have to make a decision between their toys and their philosophy versus actual talent, which is something that I find utterly fascinating about the way the Rangers have assembled this roster. It's so much more about like the names and the brand as opposed to like the results, which that's an entirely different thing, and I'm sure something we'll deliberate a lot over the summer. Moving on here, the one that I think it's hard to kind of gauge is the intangibles, is the leadership, the preparation, the mindset, because this group has been so up and down all year.
Yeah.
Where even though they've largely played good hockey, I think they're seventh or eighth in the entire league standings points wise. They've had a good season. They might sniff 100 points if everything goes right for them. Still don't feel that great about this group facing a ton of adversity. That's the weird thing. Like, you would say, like, getting out of the hole they dug themselves that first 2 months, dating back to the first weekend of December, where I think they were like, I want to say they were like eighth in lottery odds in the first week of December, something like that, to where they are now. That's quite the turnaround.
Sure.
But I've never felt like that great about the team on a day-to-day basis where we know what we're going to get. They've been so up and down, inconsistent, Jekyll and Hyde, whatever corny phrase you want to use to explain it. That I'm very middling on in terms of their intangibles.
Yeah, I would agree, because it is really difficult to gauge the team when the team doesn't know how to gauge themselves. It's like that. That's a really it's hard for outsiders like us, because we're not on the team, to say, okay, well, how are they mentally? How are they as a group when they don't know? They have no idea, right? Like you can some people have, I think wrongfully, but some people have highlighted that Trouba helmet throw as like the turning point of the season or whatever. But again, if Trouba like wasn't the reason for all those goals against, he wouldn't have had to throw his helmet in the first place. But I digress. Like the thing about this team is that game in and game out, we kind of don't know what the leadership group is. We have a sort of understanding of what happens and on the ice and who has the letters and et cetera, but what does the leadership group do before games, during intermissions, after games? We see the highlights when the Twitter account posts the hat, and like funny videos. But what does the leadership group actually do when the cameras are off? That is something that we don't know, and I would like to know the answer to, because of how inconsistent the Rangers have been. Where they've had good stretches and they've had bad stretches where they continue to win somehow. I don't really know quite, because
It's the talent. It's the
The
talent.
Rangers are an enigma to a certain extent, because they can play terribly and still win, and sometimes they play really well and lose. Like, this team is weird like that. But game in and game out, especially recently over the course of the past few weeks, where the Rangers have consistently gotten off to terrible starts in the first period of games, isn't that where the leadership group has to step in and say, hey, what is with these terrible starts? We have to get it together early on. We have to help our goaltender. We have to play as a team. We have to clean these things up before the playoffs. Why haven't these issues been addressed? If
Yeah.
the leadership group is as strong as the Rangers would like us to believe, where are the changes then? Everybody, like even Gallant, joked about how terrible the starts have been. That's on the leadership group. That includes the head coach. Everybody is a part of that, and yet the changes have not existed. So that's on the leadership group.
So one last thing on this before we talk about the coaching and get out of here. I think people there those the first two parts of this go hand in hand. The talent and the intangibles go hand in hand. The reason the Rangers win all of these games, even though they don't play that well, is the talent. But at a certain point, you need those intangibles to elevate the talent. The talent needs to be mentally locked in. It needs to raise the ceiling, to reach the maximum potential of a group. It needs to be right in every single facet, preparation, mindset, attitude, all of those little intricacies that go into defining what intangibles are. Those raise the ceiling of a group. It's why, even wrongly, teams prioritize bottom six guys, guys who do the gritty stuff, because that goes a long way with raising morale amongst the group. Because the Rangers have been so up and down all year, it's really hard to gauge what the group's general vibe is, what the baseline is, because we don't really know what like the peak is or the bottom is, because it's been so up and down all year. Because the group doesn't have that, the clear cut identity of this is our leader, he sets the tone, whatever. Sure, they've got guys with letters, like you said. We see how they play, how they talk in front of the media. But until you're able to get that deeper level of understanding of what the dynamics within the locker room are like, you're left where we are, where we're just kind of unconvinced that this group is as strong as you said it was in terms of the leadership. Because if the talent had the leadership to kind of steer it in the right direction, we wouldn't be worried about this. That's the
Sure.
thing. If it had shown the capacity for elevating the group this season, we would be talking about that. Sure, last year's group, they showed a lot of balls. They weren't that good in that Pittsburgh series, but they kept plugging away. They got a few bounces to go their way. They stuck with it and they pulled it out. Sure, they've done that a lot in the regular season, but we're going to see what that looks like against good teams going forward. And then the last part of this is the coaching staff, which to an extent is tied to the intangibles, because the coaching staff, and I can speak to this as somebody who's been doing stuff with the Flames all season. At some point, the coaching staff, if the players aren't meeting up their expectations, aren't playing up to their ability, that falls on the coaching staff. We've talked about how the Rangers have won a lot of games they shouldn't have because of the talent. Can the coaching staff tap into this talent and get them to that next level? Can you get all three of these parts aligned to a point where everything's working? Or if one of the three isn't working, they still got the other two to fall back on. Of the three, I am least confident in the coach, but that's just a me thing based on how Gallant's coached the first 2 years here. He's had these situations where games have gotten away from him, and he just doesn't read the room. He's got the most infamous third period meltdown, maybe in the history of the NHL, when he was with the Vegas Golden Knights. Didn't call a timeout at any point when the Sharks were rallying from 4-0 down. The Rangers game against the Devils last year, where the Devils scored 5 goals in the second period, and he did not call a single timeout. I think Gallant is fine. I think he's one of the 15 or 16 best coaches in the NHL. I don't think he's one of the 5 worst. I don't think he's elevating a group. I think that's the issue with the players coach is I don't think they can elevate a group, get more out of them, because they're not the tactician. They're not the fiery motivator. They're the let me just let these guys go about their thing. I can give them a pep talk if they need it. But if you're going to get to that next level, you need somebody who's going to be able to unlock it in another way, whether it be tactically, being a hardo, whatever. Being everybody's friend is really hard to get more out of them because nobody wants to be rude to their friends. Nobody wants to be the, does he know he's doing that guy, like we talked about in the second segment.
Well, going back to the best coaches in the league, remember what John Cooper did?
Yeah.
He in the third period of one of the games early on in the season, he benched the best players because they played like ass.
Yeah.
And they lost the game. And John Cooper after the game was like, "Well, they played like ass, so why would I play them?" Like it.
Yeah.
Gerard Gallant does none of that. He does absolutely none of that. Like he will continue to put the best players on the ice, despite how good they are or how bad they've been playing. He will give them the allotted ice time that he has in his head, regardless of the situation at hand. Like that is what he will do. He doesn't adapt. He doesn't do a lot of the things that I would say that a really good coach like John Cooper does. And I think I forget which game it was, but it was on a national broadcast the Lightning were on recently, and the broadcasters were talking about how John Cooper, like after a recent bad stretch, pulled everybody in for a practice, put everybody on the ice, talked for like a few minutes, ran one drill, and then he just left. Like he left and he pulled the coaching staff off the ice and made the players figure it out themselves. Coaches like that's a wild thing to do for a head coach in the NHL. He did it, and because he has rapport with the Lightning leadership group, and this has been a team that's been together for a long time, it worked, and they've been playing a lot better since. Gerard Gallant is a status quo coach. He will do something his way, regardless of whether it works or not. And
Yeah.
if it works, he's a genius, and if it doesn't, oh well. Sometimes it'd be like that, and my way was still the best way, and that is another worry that I have with this team come playoff time, as you said, with especially the Vegas meltdown. He didn't adjust then. He's not adjusting now. And yeah, like, you can say, oh, we're just hating on Gerard Gallant. The Rangers have won so many games with Gerard Gallant as a head coach and this and that. Well, they could have won more. Like if they had a head coach that knew how to adapt on the fly, and actually, I've said this like multiple times on Twitter. It's just like, is Gerard Gallant selling these timeouts in the black market after the game? Like, what is he doing with them? Is he holding on to them like memorabilia? Like, you have the timeout, you might as well use it. Like, there's been so many times throughout the court, as you mentioned in Vegas and for the Rangers as well. Like, game is getting away from you, my guy. Call the stupid timeout. Just call it. I don't care if you lose your challenge. You won't need it. If the game continues to go as it has gone, you won't need the challenge because the game will be over by that point. Call the stupid thing. Just call it.
Exactly. All right. Last point on this, and we'll get everybody out of here. At some point, you got to find a way to get everything clicking. It's going to be a real short trip. That the recurring theme amongst all of these teams that have won the Stanley Cup is being able to handle adversity, because adversity will come. There will be an injury over the course of a long playoff run. That's how these things go. Teams have to be able to withstand those. Coaches have to be able to unlock performances from guys that haven't been there all year. I'm trying to think of a way there's a certain harmony to it all where you need a lot of things to go right. And just relying on the talent, like the Rangers have done, is how you run into these issues where at 5-on-5, you can't create enough. The power play stands around. Real quick, you're in all these games where you're scoring 1 or 2 goals, and it's really hard to win when you only score 1 or 2 goals with your defense the way it is. That's a little bit of a doom outlook, but that's generally how the NHL playoffs go. You need a lot to go right to win. Even the best teams, the Avalanche needed stuff to go right for them. The Lightning needed stuff to go right for them. The Blues, the Capitals, the Penguins, the Blackhawks, the Kings, the Blackhawks again, the Kings again, the Bruins. You need a lot to go right along the way. So trying to get as much in a row as you can before you get there, that's the goal. That is the mindset you got to have here over these last 5 games. Take care of your business. Play it. Don't get anyone hurt if you can help it. Try and figure out little details to iron out before you get there, and go into the playoffs with the best possible chance you have to win. That's the goal. Be ready to go when the puck's ready to go for game 1, round 1 in New Jersey. Be ready to go, put your best foot forward, and hit the ground running. That's the goal.
100%. It's one of those like, and you might a fan might listen to this and go like, oh, they're being negative, they're being haters, they're being this and that. Well, again, like, we're not here to be all sunshine and roses. Like, we're here to tell you what's actually happening, like what the truth of the matter is. Rangers have a lot of talent, and if things go well, they definitely have the potential to go far in the playoffs. But they're also one bad week away from flaming out.
Yeah.
Like, this is one of those, because the Rangers have been so inconsistent for the entire season, it's very difficult to gauge what they will do come playoff time. Because if they have a great week, they can sweep the Devils, and all of a sudden, they're winning the cup. Everything is amazing. Or they can have a bad week and fall 3-1 in the series, or get swept, or whatever. Like, this team is so unreadable that it's difficult to place a lot of confidence in the roster, or in the entire franchise for that matter. If they have been consistently playing a certain way the entire season, and they've gotten consistent results throughout the season, it would have been way easier to place a good amount of confidence in how they're going to play in the playoffs. But we have no idea, because game in and game out, the Rangers either look really good or really bad, and there's kind of no in between. So what makes you think that come playoff time that'll magically change? If it has gotten the Rangers to this point through 82 games, all of a sudden game 83, the Rangers are just going to fix everything that's been going wrong all season long? The answer is no. That's not how sports works. That's not how reality works. So it's tough to say definitively I'm very confident or I'm very not confident, because we have no idea what the Rangers will look like game in and game out, or even period in, period out. We have no idea.
That'll do it for this week's episode of the Liberty Blue Podcast. Make sure you are subscribed on whatever podcast platform you prefer. If you're video inclined, YouTube, Liberty Blue Podcast. Make sure you're following along Andrew and I on Twitter at Nick Zararis, Zararis. Andrew's handle is Chelney Andrew, Chelney Andrew. We'll see you guys next week. Let's take care of business here. Nobody get hurt. Try and play a little bit better hockey. We'll see you guys next week.